Hi, I'm Gerald Campbell, and this is the Flying Mother scenario for AVIA 430, Liberty University. The scenario is we're planning a trip to take the family to go see the in-laws here in about a week, right? Um, there's a lot of things you need to consider to do this. So, first things first, you have to take in the fact that, I'm the pilot. I will be the only rated pilot in the airplane. So I also have to look at, am I safe? All right. Am I feeling okay? Illness, medication. Um, you know, uh, you got safety, you got alcohol, you got fatigue, you got emotional stress. Everything that kind of goes into that. All right. Now, with that, when I take passengers, I also like to put that same I'm safe checklist onto my passengers. Okay, and I make sure that my passengers themselves also fit the bill for the I'm safe checklist. Because the last thing you want is if somebody's got sinuses and congestion, you don't want to take them up to altitude. That can make it worse, right? But if somebody is not feeling good, somebody is sick, that could create an emergency. So not only does the pilot need to do the I'm safe checklist, but you need to make sure that, especially in general aviation, you need to make sure your passengers do an I'm safe checklist, and if they don't know what that is, they don't know how to do that, do it for them. Ask them the questions. Hey, how are you ill today? Are you on medications? When's the last time you had alcohol? Right? When's the last time you ate? You know, you can assess your passengers just as well. All right. So make sure that before you take off, do that. Okay. Then you have the aircraft. You look at the type of aircraft you have. Okay. We'll say we're doing a Piper PA-44 Seminole. Um, you know, so now you have to see, okay, so as the pilot, am I rated for that? Right? Does it have an MEL? Okay, is there a good pre-flight? Does it have all this inspections? Okay, it's an annual inspection. If you're renting the aircraft, does it have a 100-hour inspection? If or some sort of progressive inspection. So you got to check all your inspections on that, right? It's the aviates, right? So you have the aviates, you got your altimeter. Okay, was your altimeter done? Was your ELT done? Was your pitot-static system done? Was if you're tracking a VOR or flying IFR, has your VOR been checked in the last 30 days, right? So you're just making sure that the airplane is airworthy, has all of its documents, aero, right? So airworthiness certificate, registration, do you have the operator's manual? Do you have the weight and balance, right? Then you want to do the weight and balance with your passengers, right? And you kind of want to figure out that weight and balance because you also want to know not only the type of aircraft, but what are the performance of that aircraft to figure out your flight plan, right? So we got about a week to do that. So we're going to do our flight plan. Now with that flight plan, okay, you kind of also look up at the for PAVE the V, right? Environment. What kind of weather are we expecting next week for this flight? All right, do we need to, are we VFR all the way down, or do I need to ensure that I have a multi-engine instrument rating? All right, and not all, you know, just because your instrument rating for single engine doesn't mean your instrument rated for multi-engine. So are you instrument rated for multi-engine? And if yes, good to go. If not, you need to make sure your IFR, your VFR, not IFR, right? And then the external pressures, okay? So it is the in-law, so it's the significant others, parents. There is some stress and pressure there, but you can't let that allow you to make a bad decision, right? You just have to stay unemotional when deciding whether or not this is going to be a go or no go flight, right? So during the flight plan, you're figuring out your origin, your destination, long the flight plan, there's a lot of things that I look at, en route. But start with our origin. Okay, you have to look at the airport you're starting from. You got to figure out your accelerated stop. You got to figure out your single engine. what is going to be your altitude, your density altitude, how high can you go with both engines, and how high, based on the weather forecasted, can you go with a single engine. And the reason this is important is because, if you're flying at 85, 10.5, altitude, and you lose an engine, is the density going to force an automatic sink rate down to a particular altitude? You need to figure out what that altitude is going to be. And then you need to look at the path and make sure there's no obstructions that is going to endanger your safety of flight, because your sink rate, because you sink automatically due to the density on being on a single engine, right? And maybe it's just the density, you have no actual level flight possible with a single engine. But you got to look around, okay? How much fuel consumption you're going to use, okay? You got two engines, so you're using twice as much fuel. Okay, how much fuel can you hold in each wings? What's going to be your weight? Then you also have to look at the aircraft limitations, the individual aircraft, what are the limitations, and the weather. What's the CG, the weight and balance, right? With all your passengers and your luggage, maybe the dog, I don't know. And once you have all this information, you have to decide, is this going to be a go or no go? And so that's so we talked about when we take off, when we land, right? All those weather factors. What I like to do is, when I'm en route, I like to pick a nice safe altitude, right? We had already mentioned, that we're going to plan our altitude for our for two engines, but what if we miss an engine, right? How low are we going to sink based on density altitude with only one engine? And is that going to be high enough for us to continue the flight? Or what point in the flight will it become unsafe, right? Flight following en route, I'm a big fan, so I will get all the frequencies necessary to get flight following, get me on radar, the transponder. I also like to look for airports along my route, so I know where other airports are. And what I do is I pull them up on my electronic flight book, and I save their airport information page. I kind of briefly look over them. I don't go too terribly in depth because I don't plan on landing there. But I have them readily available. So in the event that I have to emergency, I have to divert, I know where I can go, right? I know from point A to point B along the route based on where I have an emergency or where my diversion needs to occur. I already know a couple of different airports that I can get to because I've already looked at them. I know that the airplane can safely land there, and then all I have to do is pull that airport information up on my electronic flight book, and I'll know more about that information. GPS, a lot of GPS, if you're using the Garmin 430, has a lot of that same information in there. So if your electronic flight book fails, you do have the GPS. If your GPS fails, you have your electronic flight book. I personally fly with a Sentry all the time. And so, I mean, it's Sentry and ForeFlight is extremely accurate. I mean, it's not an approved chart to land at, but I have had a DP tell me, hey, when in doubt, if you lose all your electronics, use your ForeFlight and land an instrument approach with your Sentry. It's a thought. Not something I'm going to just go out and do, but it is a thought. So, task delegation. I like to delegate tasks to my passenger, right? They're sitting up in the cockpit with me, right? I can give them the checklist. I can have them read the checklist for me while I perform the checklist. I can have them, show them how to find information, on my electronic flight book for airport information, and be like, hey, what is this frequency? All right. Kind of give them a quick tutorial on how to input the frequency and say, hey, we're going to have a frequency change. Can you dial in this frequency? And they can go in there and dial it in. Of course, you trust and verify. Same thing with the ATIS, right? Or when we hear the ATIS, I say, hey, here's the ATIS. This is how you listen to it. This is what you need to write down. Write this down for me. Okay, so you can delegate these tasks to them, even though they are not pilots. And of course, it's everybody's responsibility to foresee and avoid. And then finally, when you are in flight, use autopilot if you have it. Let's make it easy. So aeronautical decision making, PAVE, decide, right? And decision is when you have an issue. Okay, detect your problem. Estimate how big of a problem is it. Choose the best solution. It's a the choose the best solution. Identify the action um, that's going to give you the best outcome, and then do it. Take action. And evaluate afterwards. Make sure that your action did in fact work out. All right. Then you have the 5 Ps. You have the plan. You have the plane. You've got the pilot. You have your passengers, and you have the programming, right? And it's just using all your resources. Okay, passengers are in fact a resource. You can delegate, use them to avoid task saturation, and that is how you can get safely to grandma's house. Thank you.